So thank you for joining us again if you were there for the first session this morning. But if you want, in the morning we had Juliet Gatteri of Alternate Doors, and she went through what really sets senior level candidates apart. Yeah. So if you missed that, there will be a recording next week. So just stay tuned for that. But now we have Sehar, and Sehar is from Kenyans Come Home. She's the head of recruitment there. And Sehar, the practice at Kenyans Come Home is in executive recruitment, and their focus is on connecting talented Kenyan and international professionals to opportunities within East Africa. Sehar actually has a background in psychology and sociology from Western University in Canada, and she's also a certified trained assessor by the Assessment and Development Consultants in the UK. Her recruitment experience, it is in executive search, it's in contingency recruitment, and she's got over 12 years of experience in that and across various sectors, including retail, fintech, e-commerce, energy, and many more. She's very passionate about supporting the talent needs of growing enterprises within the region and sourcing top professionals locally and abroad. And for candidates, for us now, it's about helping them find their perfect fit, which is a role that challenges and fulfills them, and supporting them through their leadership journey. Yeah. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Sehar, and Sehar will be taking us through what you really need to do if you're considering moving back home, yeah, and you've been working abroad. But then at the very end, even if that's not really your focus, she's going to be just taking your questions about different areas of recruiting that you may have. So whatever questions we had from Juliet's first session, you could also post them here. Yeah. So Sehar, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Beryl. Thanks for that introduction. And also thank you for having us be part of this HR Summit this week. I think it's come at a great time for many people. So thank you for all your efforts putting that together. So hello, everybody. As Beryl mentioned, my name is Sehar, and I head recruitment at Kenyans Come Home. I hope you're all settled in and have some lunch with you while you tune into this session. I will be speaking, really just about transitioning back home and how to sort of prepare for that. But I think a lot of the content as well can be relevant for people who are already in the region and may just be looking at a job transition or a career transition of sorts. So great, thank you so much for joining me. As I go along, if anybody has any questions or any comments, please feel free to use the chat. Type it in and I'll try and, sort of answer them as we go along. And then I will have quite a bit of time towards the end for just a question and answer session where, we can discuss anything that's been presented as well as maybe any other questions or concerns that might come up around recruitment. So great, let's get started. Yeah. So Kenyans Come Home, just as a quick introduction to us. So we operate as a boutique full service executive recruitment firm. Since the beginning, we've been focused on mid to senior level roles across the region and have worked with clients across multiple industries. So everything from, manufacturing and insurance to e-commerce and fintech, to agriculture and healthcare. And as per our name, one of our key goals is to connect Kenyan diaspora to exciting and exclusive job opportunities in the region and bring those Kenyans back home. But alongside that, we have also built up a very strong local network of Kenyans who are already based in the region, who might be looking for a career change and just seeking a leadership position that, would allow them to make a real impact in our communities. I know the last few months have been challenging for many businesses and individuals, including ourselves. And the effects of COVID-19 have been felt worldwide and impacted funding for many new ventures, affected general operations, and certainly anticipated growth for many businesses. So we've witnessed a bit of a pause on recruitment at this time, but I'm hopeful that this is going to change in the next few months as the market begins to open up again. And so, maybe setting aside the last few months, I think over the years, we've really seen that Kenya has been going through a real period of growth. It's been attracting significant investment into the region. We've been seeing a thriving entrepreneurial scene, and with terms like a Silicon Savannah being thrown around. And we've also seen significant changes within more traditional industries, with an increased uptake in technology and a focus on innovation and doing things differently. So, that's really meant that there have been, and I believe will continue to be, lots of interesting and new and exciting opportunities at a senior level. But the key challenge I think most of our clients face is just finding the right person, finding the right talent to help drive their growth agenda, and finding the right fit from a skill set perspective, a cultural fit perspective, an industry knowledge perspective. And so that's where we come in. So we understand our clients' needs, and then connect with you guys, both locally and in the diaspora, to share these opportunities, find the right fit, and help you guys also transition and move into roles that can help you be part of that growth journey for our clients. So over the last couple of years, we've placed over 120 senior executives, and really it's been such a joy to follow their careers over the years and just see them thrive in new roles, and grow and lead many of the startups and high growth companies that we've placed them in. It's been exciting to see them sometimes, take a huge leap and shift industries, like Roslyn, who had spent 13 years working in financial services in the US with GE, and then moved back home and took up a general management role with our client Jubilee Life Insurance, just to offer them a different perspective on how they did things within what's been a very traditional life insurance space. We've also seen candidates move from a more corporate setup to a startup, like Jacob, who we placed a couple of years ago. He was working across East Africa in FMCG and telco, with companies like Kenyan Kotex, Celtel, and Telcom Kenya. And then he took up a COO role with D-Light as they were setting up and growing their presence in the region, and pioneering the pay-as-you-go solar energy space. He was actually recently promoted to managing director for Africa, which was really amazing to see, and just exciting to be sort of following his progress and impact. And then, we've also, of course, seen many candidates move home and readjust after so many years abroad, like Martin, who worked in banking for many years in Canada and then moved home to lead analytics for Mkopa Solar, or Brian, who had graduated from Yale and worked in New York and South Africa in various investment outfits, and then moved home, and we placed him at Novastar Ventures, where he's helping to lead investments into innovative and impactful ventures within the East African region. So, over the years, I think I've interacted with so many bold and intelligent and just passionate leaders. And that's probably my favorite part of this job. So that's, I guess, a bit of an intro to us. I think one of the key questions that comes up is, are Kenyan professionals actually moving back? And the simple answer is yes. Of the 120 executives we've placed, 54% have spent some time abroad, and made the decision to move back at various stages of their career. So, some moved back right after completing their education abroad. Others stayed on to get additional exposure and work experience. And yet others have had the opportunity to be seconded to other countries and gain that exposure midway through their career. Or, we've also interacted with many Kenyans who have spent most of their careers and lives abroad, and then at some point just felt that, it was time to return home. And what is it that's bringing them home? I think the strongest pull from our experience for most of the candidates to move home has really been more emotional and driven by family. And that, I think, continues to be an important part of Kenyan life. People make time for family and friends. It's still a very important, aspect. And so many candidates, want to move home to take care of aging parents or be closer to their siblings. Many of them also want their children to grow up with family around them and to have, a Kenyan childhood like they did and understand their roots. More and more international schools are opening up, and so children are able to access a high standard of education, as well as an incredible social education, with things like drama and swimming and community work and so on. So I think that's been a very key reason that at least we've seen to be driving people back home. I think also most people, once they have children, they're really keen to move home and take advantage of free babysitting services from grandparents. So I think that's certainly a big driver as well. I think the second thing is definitely career opportunities and growth. The Kenyan market is less saturated. There are many industries that are not as well developed as other countries. And so I think Kenyans are seeing the opportunities to bring in knowledge from other countries and help accelerate growth and shape some of these industries. So there's just a lot more kind of agility and I think a lot more opportunity back home. And then that also ties in with the thriving entrepreneurial scene. Many people who've returned have decided to pursue this path and either join or found, organizations and ventures that are solving some of our biggest problems through a for-profit model and leveraging on technology and just using very creative solutions. So there's been a real buzz and energy, I think, in the last sort of 2-3 years in Nairobi that's really contagious. And I think back home, people have better networks, better safety nets as well, just to take a risk and invest or start a business. And then if it doesn't work out, they're quite easily able to shift gears as well. So I think it's very appealing for Kenyans who have that entrepreneurial itch and want to build something. I think, the other aspect, of course, is just the opportunity to give back, finding purpose and impact. Many individuals, I think particularly later on in their careers, initially, maybe earlier on, you're just looking for experience, you're looking to, for financial security. But I think later on, what we've seen come to play a big part in a driver for a candidate is really just finding something where, there's impact being made, finding a real purpose. So I think the ability for Kenyans to use their skill sets to come back and help, drive the economy forward or influence and develop the next generation of leaders in Kenya. And then, be part of solving some of the continent's biggest problems. I think that's a key driver. Africa is now, the next frontier, as I think, as we see and we've been reading out there. And I think that Kenyans want to come home and be part of writing that story. And I think personally, I also think that, just little things like I think just coming back to, sunshine and Kenyan humor and, childhood friends and family and just that feeling of belonging. I think that's a big driver. There's just no place like home. In terms of my personal story, I mean, I've been working in recruitment for over 12 years now. And initially, I studied in Canada, as Beryl mentioned, and I wasn't quite sure, if and when I wanted to come home. But when I did return after university, I think working here initially, I realized how agile the working space is here. There's so much more room for creativity and just an ability to be more entrepreneurial in the way we do things, whether it's, in a corporate setting or, whether it's setting up a side hustle, which I know everybody has. So, there's just so much more flexibility I find here. And I just felt that from a career perspective, there were so many more opportunities and it could, be accelerated, I think, compared to maybe me, moving back to Canada. Plus the Canadian winters, I mean, I don't think I'm built for that. So yeah, I think weather was a big thing for me to come back. So I think, in terms of transitioning home, though, I know it's not easy and there's definitely, challenges to that, particularly if you've been gone for a number of years. And so, through our conversations with many Kenyans, many candidates who've moved back, I've just listed a couple of, common things that seem to come up. I think first is just lost networks and a feel for what's on the ground. There's no real kind of centralized source for for job roles being listed, or information on new companies popping up, or new industries, or where is there growth and job opportunities, or even sort of understanding the culture and pay scales at various organizations. I think a lot of that data is still missing, or is not necessarily in the public sphere. So just losing networks and having been away from so long, it can take a while to just readjust, reacquaint yourself with what's really happening here on the ground. A lot of recruitment I still find is done through networking, or using one or two executive search firms, or is just really advertised through word of mouth. So I think finding out what jobs are available and what companies are popping up. I think a lot of that information is found through networking, and rebuilding those networks can take a while. It can be a challenge, and I think initially people who move down, can feel a little bit lost initially, I think, until you find your footing. The second thing is, I think, translating international experience to local requirements. And I think what I mean by that is, sometimes having spent time abroad, certain industries may be far more developed internationally. And so coming back down, to Kenya, it may be a bit of a challenge. The banking sector, if you're working in a very specific, space, it may be very different to what's actually happening here. We recently recruited for an asset management company, for example. And as I spoke to candidates who are working abroad, the markets there are just so different to where we are here. And so just translating that experience, takes a little bit of understanding, and you need to kind of familiarize yourself with that. Also just simple things like, in another region, you may have been working for a company that is very well known in a particular industry or space, but back home in Kenya, people may not know that brand. They may not recognize it. We recognize multinational names, if it's a Coca-Cola or a Unilever or a GE, but there may be other, very highly regarded firms abroad that we may not be familiar with. And so I think making sure that you're able to translate that so people understand, perhaps the scale, I guess the scale of kind of the role that you are playing abroad. So I think, a key focus here is really thinking about transferable skill sets, what you're able to bring in, and just looking at it from the perspective of somebody who's based here, and ensuring that they understand, what it is that you are really doing internationally. I think reintegrating back into the corporate culture can also be a challenge. Especially if you've been away for a while, learning the operational challenges on the ground, the regulatory requirements, which, may have changed, and even maybe experiencing a bit of culture shock. As much as you may be Kenyan, if you've spent many years abroad, you might come back and find that there's actually quite a lot of learning, unlearning, and relearning that you have to do. You might need to relearn what it means to be a Kenyan in today's context. Things have changed rapidly, both culturally or professionally, and it may feel very different from how it was when you first moved away. I think also, living in Nairobi can be expensive. Don't underestimate it. I think that's one of the key things that many Kenyans coming back say to me, that I didn't realize how expensive things were here. So don't underestimate it. Definitely do some research and plan and budget accordingly. Also keep in mind that local salary packages are generally still lower than international markets. Many of our candidates have to take sometimes even a 30 to 50% pay cut. I mean, this depends significantly on the type of company that you join, an international firm versus a local firm, or a startup versus multinational. But we still certainly see that as a common pattern. So that's something that I think a lot of candidates moving back, find a bit challenging. And I think job hunting takes time. A lot of people, think it'll happen very quickly. And of course, I think everyone starts very positive. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it's great. And things get accelerated. But other times, you might have to have countless meetings, send endless email applications, attend numerous interviews. Some might go well, some might not go well. Recruitment processes themselves can also be very long. So I think, the trick there is just to keep trying, to keep trying, be resilient, be positive. Just anticipate that it may take a few months though. And then of course, just get yourself a good recruitment partner, like Kenyans Come Home or any of the other recruitment firms, just to help you through that transition and to, understand the expectations around that. They can also push for feedback from a client, which can help speed along a process. So I think that's a key element. And the last thing probably that I think comes up quite a bit is just that, what works abroad doesn't always work back home. So many of our clients are looking for Kenyans with international experience because they want that international, knowledge and exposure to sort of be implemented back home. But I think you'll rediscover that the Kenyan market is very different. Consumer habits are very different. So I think, the value you bring is the experience and exposure to international models. But actually what sets you apart is the ability to then adapt them for the local market based on your roots here. So, it's really sort of adjusting, the knowledge and the skill sets and the learnings that you've had abroad to what would work in Kenya. And another challenge is that you're coming back to a market that's growing very quickly, where some of the structures and frameworks aren't robust enough to effectively support that growth. We see that as a key challenge, not only in startups, but even with sort of, more well-established businesses. They've scaled up quickly, but they just don't have the right structures and frameworks to support it. So, if you're coming back expecting things to work perfectly, or that, it'll be easy to kind of implement it and there won't be too many challenges. I think, there can be some disappointments. So I think it's just important to have realistic expectations about this. But this, I think, is also where the real opportunity and excitement lies. This is where candidates actually sort of really are able to add value. They can come in, they help shape and develop the structures. And I think that impact is I've seen a lot of candidates derive a lot of satisfaction from that. But it can be frustrating, of course, and so I think in terms of, sectors and skill sets that are in demand. Now, I guess as a disclaimer here, I think there's absolutely opportunities across, all the sectors. This is really just more from my perspective and the Kenyans Come Home team perspective in terms of what we've been seeing, and I suppose where we are predominantly recruiting in. I think, obviously agriculture is a key sector. It dominates the Kenyan economy. With major agricultural exports like tea and coffee, cut flowers, vegetables. So there are many well-known successful companies in the agri sector, including, Kenya Tea Packers or Frigoken, Kenya Nut Company, Unga Group, Brookside Dairies. All these companies have been growing and expanding and continue to have a very strong presence here. But then there's also tech startups in the agricultural space who are looking to, fill gaps within this agricultural supply chain. So companies are scaling up here, including, firms like Twiga Foods, who I'm sure, many of you have maybe read about. I know they got a lot of press coverage, or iProcure, or, Ujuzi Kilimo, who are, focusing on precision farming and analytics. There's also a lot of financial services companies in this sector that are also popping up and are looking to, again, fill the gaps in the supply chain and support smallholder farmers who are really the backbone of this industry. And that can include, AFC, which is a government parastatal, or Pula, one of our clients who provide agricultural crop insurance, or One Acre Fund, who provide asset-based financing and training to farmers. Farm Drive, who provide digital loans to farmers, and so on and so on. So I think, there's certainly a lot of really interesting, companies popping up in this space, and really trying to fill in, various gaps along the supply chain. I think energy is also, definitely a growing space, and maybe I'd particularly say the renewable energy space. So we've worked with several businesses within the pay-as-you-go solar energy space, who are focused on manufacturing and distributing solar products to customers at the bottom of the pyramid, and allowing them to access renewable energy on a daily or weekly basis. So some of the clients we've worked with include Azuri Technologies, D-Light, Solar Now, Greenlight Planet, Phoenix International, Mcopa Solar, who again, I'm sure you've read quite a bit. Again, I know there's been a lot of press coverage on this space, because it's been a really growing, fast-growing and exciting industry, I think, with real impact for customers, across really Africa. Another area that we're seeing a lot of growth in is retail. And I know there's a 2017 report by the Oxford Business Group placing Kenya's retail market as the continent's second most developed, trailing, behind South Africa, and one of the fastest growing sectors within the continent. And we've certainly been seeing this, besides the growth in traditional on-site, retailing, technology has also fueled online shopping activities. And we've seen a real growth in e-commerce businesses, and online retailing websites like Jumia or OLX or Kilimall, Pigiami. We've worked with a company called Copia Global that are also, using e-commerce, but to, connect with and supply products to customers based in rural areas and at the bottom of the pyramid. So, we've been seeing increased investment in and growth in that space, as well as in the growth of supermarket retail chains as well. I think especially after the fall of Nakumat, we've seen a lot of new supermarket chains, growing and looking for strong talent, as well as in other retail models, such as the pharmaceutical space with pharmacy chains like Good Life Pharmacies, one of our clients who, again, have been growing quite rapidly, have received international funding and again are, have been looking for strong talent to help lead their growth agenda. Education, I think, is another key sector we've been seeing quite a bit of growth within. We've been seeing investments and the development of new international private schools, such as I think recently there was the acquisition of Hillcrest by GEMS Education, or Sabis International School setup, which was partly owned by Centum. We've also worked with and seen growth within independent school networks that are delivering the local curriculum, but with greater focus on utilizing world-class teaching methods and emphasizing skills required in the 21st century. So clients here include Bridge International Academies and Nova Pioneer. We've also seen growth in the training sector or in the education space for senior executives with companies like the African Management Initiative or the Africa Leadership University. And so, there again, we've been seeing them looking for, skill sets, both in, whether it's curriculum development or research or analytics or, helping them sort of get online and so on. So quite a bit of growth there. I think infrastructure, of course, is another industry that, we've seen a lot of growth. The construction, I think the construction industry was forecasted to grow at an average, compound growth rate of about 6.8%. There's a lot of port, rail, and housing projects and coming up, and they're expected to drive growth in this sector. And I think about 30% of Kenyan roads, need rehabilitation or reconstruction. So again, we've worked with a few companies in this space, and I think a key skill set and need here is project managers and specialized engineering skill sets. So that's definitely been a space where I think there's a lack of enough locally qualified and talented individuals. And then I think another industry I'll just quickly mention is the private equity and venture capital space. So we've recruited for a number of PE and VC funds, including Acumen Fund, Novastar Ventures, Village Capital, Catalyst, LGT Lightstone, among others. I think, as more international investment firms are increasing their focus on Africa, they're looking to have a local presence on the ground and a local office. So recruitment has increased there, but again, we find that finding qualified talent is a challenge, and so that's where actually a lot of candidates with international experience have really had a lot of opportunity. From a skill set perspective, I think every industry has a need for talented individuals to lead some of the critical management functions. So just areas like HR, IT, finance, procurement, business development, and so on. So I think individuals with this skill set can really look across any industry that feels interesting for them. The biggest challenge we find when recruiting these roles is matching candidates with some level of industry understanding and more importantly, I think the right personality and cultural fit for the role. So for example, if your experience in finance or procurement has largely been within the services industry, then it may be a little bit difficult to transition into the consumer goods space, for example. And then the second area, like I said, is just really around cultural fit. So a candidate may have the right skill set for a role, but a key determining factor for many of our clients is then really thinking about that cultural fit. We've also been seeing an increased need for more specialized skill sets or industry-specific skill sets, particularly within new or underdeveloped sectors. And I think, like I said, that's where Kenyans with international experience may have a significant advantage because they're able to bring in expertise and skill sets that are not available locally. For example, we found that there is a gap when it comes to finding qualified investment professionals locally, or management consultants even. As McKinsey were setting up here a few years back, we worked with them quite a bit. And McKinsey, Bain, Dalberg, they were all setting up offices here around the same time. And they were desperately looking for Kenyans who had enough management consulting experience to take on management roles in the firm. But of course, with all of them being quite new here, the talent pool available was very small. And so they were all sort of battling for the same few qualified individuals available. I think, with the rise in e-commerce as well in retail, Kenyans who've worked internationally in e-commerce settings, that's become a key focus, a key need. We also recently searched for a CFO for a supermarket retail chain that a Pan-African PE fund had just invested in, and finding candidate, with not only sort of strong financial expertise, but specific experience within a supermarket retail chain, that was a real challenge. And so that's, again, where I think there's opportunities for Kenyans with that experience to come home. I think skills and expertise in areas like data analytics or digital marketing or software engineering as well, we're seeing that being in high demand. And this really cuts across all industries as companies are increasingly becoming more digital and more dependent on technology to drive their business forward, whether they're in the insurance space or the banking space or in agriculture or healthcare. And then I've also put in, just at the end there, entrepreneurial mindsets. And the reason I put it in there as a key skill set is the reason is that more than anything, I think from our experience, clients are willing to train up individuals on specific skill sets or allow them time to adjust to a new industry, as long as they display drive and an entrepreneurial approach to things. I think that's really what sets candidates apart here. Problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, those are the most sought after and valuable skill sets that we see clients in need of. They're looking for smart, hands-on, driven individuals who think differently and be able to innovate and create and build systems, who can drive projects independently and all the way through execution. I think the work culture is changing and it's becoming less hierarchical, and our clients are really looking for leaders who can speak up, who can think differently, and who can really take initiative. I'm just going to stop there for a second and just open it up in case anybody has, some questions, or comments here, and so, I'm just going to open it up here a little bit. And Beryl, maybe in case I've missed anything, just let me know if there's any questions I've missed.
No problem. I can see some in the chat.
So I see one from Munene. How easily can one get a regional sales role, regional in terms of East Africa? So, we have actually seen, I think one of the key function areas that we recruit for is business development and sales. I think, particularly with high growth companies that are scaling up, they're always looking for strong commercial individuals who can help them. And I think East African experience is fantastic because as they're entering new markets as well, that really positions somebody, well for a role like that. So I think certainly there are definitely roles out there. In terms of how easily, you can get a regional role, I think it very much just depends on which companies are you applying to, what are you targeting? Like I said, I think I would focus particularly on high growth businesses that are, currently expanding into East Africa or into a new market, and are looking for kind of, experienced commercial individuals to take that over. I think in a more corporate space, certainly there is a lot of, there are a lot of roles available. I do find that within a multinational or within more corporate space, they tend to first try to recruit from within. So I do find, and I think particularly maybe within sales, I do find that they will the first priority will be to hire an individual who already knows the team, knows the product, knows the industry, and generally is able to then step into that role. So I personally have been seeing more opportunities within the sort of I wouldn't say startup, but maybe the high growth space. Hilda is asking, have you worked with individuals in the NGO sector? So yes and no. I think that, we have worked with a couple of nonprofits, but, in my experience, what I generally find within the NGO sector is that they don't actually work with recruiters very often. The reason for that is I think, number one, they're quite cost conscious. And so for them to sort of justify working with an external agency can be a little bit challenging. And then also because they tend to have very strong internal HR resources who can manage, the process. So I find that they tend to recruit themselves more often. And then, secondly, I think they also tend to get very strong applications. There are certain websites and certain, certain websites and I guess platforms that a lot of NGOs use where they post their jobs on there and tend to get, a lot of applications. So if you're interested in that sector, my recommendation would be to network directly with the NGOs that you're interested in and explore some of those platforms that they tend to advertise within. Kevin says, what are the key qualifications that Kenyan companies value? I think when it comes to qualifications, so, in my experience, I think work experience tends to trump qualifications. Most roles that we will recruit for at a senior level, I think the basic requirements will always be a minimum of a bachelor's degree with a preferred master's degree that is relevant for the role. Sometimes the master's degree is required. Sometimes, it's preferred. So I think from just an education perspective, I think to be competitive, certainly a bachelor's and a master's degree is important. And then I think depending on the role that you're applying to, and I'll go over this a little bit later, but depending on the role you're requiring to, they may be specific industry qualifications you require. For example, for any CFO or accounting role, you would need to have an ACCA or a CPAK. For any HR role, in order to be employed, you would also need to be registered with the Institute of Human Resource Management, and you would need to have a diploma or a degree or some qualification within human resources. So I think that varies company to company. But what I find instead, like I said, is work experience tends to count for a lot more rather than just the qualifications. But I think also, we certainly do see clients valuing international education or international qualifications and experience. Will Kister says, Kenyans working abroad do come back home with behaviors that scare locals. Example, their accent. What behaviors do these individuals need to shed off to enable them to fit well back home? So I don't know. I think maybe I'll respond to that from a much more kind of personal context, or just in my own personal view. I think sometimes transitioning back home, as I mentioned, especially if you've been away for a very long time, you sort of have to be ready to unlearn, relearn, and learn, new behaviors. And again, like I said, what does it mean to be a Kenyan in today's context? It may be very different from a few years back when you were here, or 10 years back when you were here. So I think just coming back home with that sort of humility and that openness to understand that yes, these are my roots, and I have gotten some, great international exposure, but I'm also coming back and recognizing that there are certain things that I may not be familiar with and I may need to relearn. And also just understanding that even individuals who have not had that international experience have so much to offer, and ensuring that, you recognize that. We have placed, alongside obviously Kenyans with international experience, we've also placed many individuals who have not necessarily had that international exposure, but they know the region, so well. They've got very strong local networks. They're very talented individuals. They've worked in multicultural, multinational, environments, and know how to navigate some of the challenges back home. So I think it's just about making sure, from a behavior perspective and communication perspective, it's just making sure that there is that balance, that yes, you have a lot to offer coming back home, but also recognizing that things may be different when implementing it here. And also, your new colleagues and those around you also have incredible amounts of knowledge to share with you. Consolata, as a recruiter, what makes a good candidate fail the job interview? I'm just going to note that down, if that's all right. And I think that we can sort of pick this up just towards the end, if that's okay, because I think there's a lot that we can talk about there. So I hope that's okay, but I'm just going to note that down, and we can certainly get back to your question. All right, if there are no other questions, I think
there was a question from Peter.
Oh,
it's actually the first one that came in, but I think you've kind of answered it, but maybe you could just look at it.
So Peter says, since new integration involves change management, since someone will be coming from a sophisticated work environment, what do you advise as a strategy in fitting into the local work environment? Yeah, so I think, that was certainly something that I mentioned, can be a little bit of a culture shock to Kenyans coming back home. You may be really excited to come in and implement all, your new learnings and knowledge. And you may even, through the interview process, talk to a client who is very excited about change and very excited to implement all these new, innovations and policies and embrace technology and so on. But then when you actually, work in the company, when you start your first day, when you get into it, you realize that the intentions may be there, but the infrastructure within the company isn't there. And that can be a very frustrating and challenging space to be in. And so that's why I say I think just certainly expect that, because what's happened is a lot of companies have scaled up quite rapidly, or have ambitions to sort of scale up quite rapidly, or innovate, but they may not have the right structures in place. So I think, in terms of advice to kind of fit into into that environment, I think it's number one, just managing your expectations, knowing that you may have to roll up your sleeves and begin, even if it's from the very basics of just first setting up the structure before being able to implement a strategy. I think that would be really important. Secondly is, talk to people locally, talk to people in the space. If you're a marketing professional or you're a procurement professional, network with other procurement professionals, within the associations or elsewhere. Understand, what is happening in the market, what are the challenges. So I think just really reacquaint yourself with what are the challenges and opportunities in the local environment, so that you can also see where can you actually implement some of the learnings you've had. And not everything is going to work. Like you said, you may be coming from a very sophisticated work environment. We may not be there yet, or maybe it just doesn't work here. And that's where I think a lot of expatriates who maybe don't have any experience here, that's their biggest challenge. And so the advantage you have is you have the networks to understand it, and so use those. Okay, so Wendy, say I want to get hired for a technical role and I'm really good at people skills, but not as good when it comes to technical skills. Do I stand a chance? I think that, I think that's a bit of a challenge. I think, what I do tend to find is, if you're going through a standard job recruitment process, and by that I mean, a role is advertised, you submit your CV, and would be going through the normal channels, then I think, to be honest, it is a little bit difficult to get hired or shortlisted for a role if you don't have the technical skill sets, because the recruiter or the HR individual at the organization will be screening CVs and looking at technical fit, because people skills or interpersonal skills, that's something that they wouldn't be able to assess at that level. That would sort of come in at an interview stage. So at the screening or shortlisting stage, all they're looking at really is experience, education, or qualifications and technical skill sets based on what you've presented in your CV. And if it doesn't match the role requirements, generally they would not be shortlisting that role. So I think from that perspective, it is quite difficult. Where I've seen this happen, where individuals may have been hired because they possessed the right attitude, the right people skills, the right entrepreneurial mindset, and maybe just didn't quite have all the technical skill sets that were initially required, but a company is willing to take a chance on them. I think that tends to be more from roles that are gotten through networking and through word of mouth, because I think once somebody meets you, they may be willing to forgive a couple of gaps when it comes to technical skills, because having interacted with you, they feel quite confident that you can do the job. So I would probably say in a standard recruitment process, a little bit challenging, but if at all possible, get yourself in front of the recruiter or the hiring manager, because that's where you can sort of show them your potential. Michael says, most NGOs require a certain level of donor-funded projects experience for finance and accounting positions. What advice do you have for one who eyes to join the NGO environment regarding to where to obtain such experience? I think the NGO space, like I said, it is a very competitive space. I do have to say that. So I know for every role that they advertise, they usually get hundreds of applications. So it is quite competitive. And like I said, at that initial shortlisting stage, whoever is shortlisting will likely just be going by the job requirements and shortlisting candidates who meet those requirements. And so if they require 10 years of experience, or if they require you having managed projects up to $1 million, for example, and you don't quite have that, if there are other candidates that do unfortunately, I think they would be shortlisted first. So it is a little bit difficult. I think there it's just really about planning out your career, thinking about, okay, in the next 5 years, or, for the roles that I'm looking at, where do I want to be? What are the requirements that they're asking for? And then making sure you try to get that experience, whether it's asking to be able to handle more in your current role, or if there's a project, happening in a different department, maybe there is a donor-funded project that's coming through, are you able to dedicate some of your time to get onto that project and get that experience? Or maybe even on a volunteer basis, if you're able to, take that time, on a volunteer basis, volunteer your time to a project, and gain that experience from there. So I think it's just about building up your experience and CV based on what it is that you're trying to target, and just finding creative ways outside of maybe just your current job, in terms of how can you get that experience. Stacy says, how to get a data science job in Kenya, where one of the qualifications is 3 years of experience, but the industry wasn't that grown in the last few years. So I just want to. Okay. So do you mean that if the one of the qualifications is 3 years, but you haven't actually got enough of that experience? Sorry, maybe Stacy, you can just clarify that. I think what I do find, though, if I can, I guess, if I'm understanding your question correctly, in terms of data science and data analytics, I think that, in my experience, is definitely an area that there's talent missing in, and a lot of companies are looking for that experience. So I think from my perspective, a lot of companies, even if someone maybe doesn't have all the years of experience, they may be more willing to still recruit. So I would say, still make that application, try to talk to someone there, showcase your experience. And then they may be willing to do it, or rather willing to interview you, willing to consider you, even if you maybe don't meet the years of experience requirement. But other than that, though, generally in my experience, I think companies are a little bit rigid when it comes to years of experience. They normally sort of put in the minimum years. And so it is a little bit of a challenge if you don't have enough years of experience. Again, what I would say is know where you want to go, and if most of the jobs require you to have a bit more experience, and you need to sort of make sure you try and get that. If you're not able to right now, again, find ways in which you can. Are there projects that you can work on? Are there places that you can volunteer? Are there any ways that you can build up that experience, so that maybe you're not well positioned for that role this year, but a year from now, you have a much stronger CV and a lot more experience behind you. Veronica says, when recruiting local talent, what key skills do you look for other than certificates and other papers? So I think, like I said, the key skill sets for a lot of our clients is really that entrepreneurial mindset. I would probably say, the rest of the skill sets may be quite role or industry specific, but one thing that, is across the board is really that entrepreneurial, hands-on approach. I think, of course, people skills and leadership skills. That's that's critical, of course. But really, problem-solving, critical thinking skills is something that most of our clients are really looking for. As long as they're able to hire someone who's smart, able to learn quickly, able to build and create and innovate within their environment and context, I think that's something that they really value. What's the appetite for new products, introduction professionals? So I think that one's a little bit tricky to maybe answer. In terms of new, I think new products, again, it just very much depends on the industry that you come from. But for example, in FMCG, in the marketing space, we've done quite a bit of recruitment there. So yeah, I think that is really just industry specific. And then Wendy, when it comes to interviews and the interviewers, like, papers aside, I don't want to see your projects nor your credentials that give you credibility for the job. Convince me why I hire you. How do you proceed? That's a good question. Again, if you don't mind, I'm just going to table that. And then, towards the end, we can certainly discuss that, because I think there's a lot that, we could go into around that. And I'm also just conscious of time, but I'm happy to chat with you further, afterwards. The one thing that I mentioned I was going to talk about is just, accreditations and memberships. I think, like I said, depending on your field, it's just a very good idea to check out what local accreditations and qualifications you need to apply for a role. So for example, HR professionals need to have an IHRM registration locally. As I mentioned, finance professionals need to have a CPA-K or an ACCA. If you're a medical professional, you need to be registered with the Kenyan Medical Practitioners and Dentist Council before you're able to practice locally. If you're a lawyer, same thing, you need to be registered with the Law Society of Kenya. Some of these registrations can take almost up to 1 year. And so again, that's just really important to do your research around that, because if you're making the move, back home to Kenya, and would need to then spend a year doing the conversion, it's really important to obviously plan for that. And then I think, like I said, just check out which local membership groups exist and reach out in advance to get connected and registered. It's a great way as well to just begin networking and understand, the local requirements, the local opportunities, what's happening in the space, and just get a real feel for your industry. The big question that I always get as well is, what sort of salary can I expect? And this is always a very difficult question to answer, I think, because, it's difficult to say what market rates are for various roles, because I don't really think that there's a very accurate or comprehensive source for this information. For example, salary, a salary for a CFO can range significantly if you're working in a startup versus a well-funded high-growth business versus a locally owned SME or a multinational. So what I would recommend is, once you've sort of understood which space you want to work in, whether it's on the entrepreneurial side, whether it's in the NGO space, whether it's, with a multinational, do some comparisons and try to collect information based on that type of industry and organization. And I think that would give you a much better comparison. And what I've seen is that, obviously on the corporate side or the NGO side, generally, the salaries are structured with a base salary and additional benefits, things like medical insurance, pension, life insurance cover. There could be things like gym memberships or, negotiated loan rates and so on. With a lot of startups and locally owned businesses and SMEs, they generally have fewer, additional benefits and sort of just look at one base salary with maybe, medical is probably the one benefit that most companies invest in. But, with a lot of the startups, we're also seeing them, maybe offering lower base salaries, but then with an offer of equity or stock options as part of the compensation package, or, a very lucrative bonus structure based on, delivery on various targets. And that can actually be very motivating for some individuals who are looking, for ownership in a business and might value that over, a fuel allowance or club membership. So this ranges quite a bit, but as I'd mentioned earlier, when Kenyans are sort of moving back home, market rates here just still don't compare to international, market rates. And so we have been seeing, and I think it's probably prudent to, expect a salary cut, anywhere from kind of 10% to even up to 50%. So I think, in terms of kind of, why move back, I think I've covered a couple of reasons and I'd love to chat more about this. But I think, just some of the key things that I wanted to mention in terms of, if you've made the decision or are thinking about making the decision, where do you start? I think one is activate your networks, get in touch with old school friends, with family, with ex-colleagues, with alumni associations, ask for introductions. One thing I hear commonly from expats is that Kenyans are very willing to make introductions and open up their, little black books, which I think is true. So, activate your networks, get in touch with people. That's the only way that you'll really understand what's happening on the ground, and you'll have access to some of the job opportunities that may not be advertised. I think update your CV and LinkedIn profile for sure. That's so important. And, companies like Angled North, and Beryl are there to support you with this. Recruiters use LinkedIn a lot. So certainly make sure that you've got a very strong online profile, and just focus on transferable skill sets if you're looking to transition into a new industry. I think, connect with recruiters and industry specialists, such as Angled North, Kenyans Come Home, other recruiters. They can really help you with your job search. Might also be, it might also be sort of helpful for you to, maybe even connect with an executive coach if you need to, or a mentor who can help, you think through what it is that you want to transition towards in terms of your career. And that really ties into just doing some research and self-reflection. I think, be clear on what you want. Being clear will help drive you in the right direction. But then also I would say, be clear but use those conversations and that research to adjust your expectations accordingly, based on the reality on the ground. I've sometimes interacted with candidates who, will come in with certain salary expectations, or, have very clear thoughts on which industries, they want to or can work in. And then find it very challenging to find those roles. And so, could be looking for months. So I think it's important to also be a bit flexible and understand, are your expectations realistic or not? And then also being open to, new industries that you've maybe not thought about working in, but you could use your skill sets. For example, with a lot of the, agri-tech or health tech, businesses, people who have worked in banking, for example, in credit and loans have actually been able to transition into, very different industries that they never thought that they would work in, but are looking for that kind of skill set. And then join associations, member groups, clubs, interest groups. That's where all the networking happens. That's where, you can connect with people on the ground. A great website, I think, is eventbrite.com or Facebook. I think there's so many events posted on there, professional networking events as well. So that's a great place to check out. And then, volunteer. Job search can be lengthy and a difficult process. So use your time wisely. Offer your expertise, for free to build your networks, to show your value, to increase your experience, and to familiarize yourself with the local environment, and give back as well. You could mentor a startup. You could offer consultancy services to an SME. You could help a membership organization put together an event, or offer, one-on-one services online. So, it's just a great way to gain market insights and grow your network. And then, like I said, anticipate a long job search process. On our side, it sometimes takes up to 4 to 6 months to close an assignment. And so, just make sure that you really plan for that. Great. So, I think, I'm now happy to take on any other questions. I know, it's 2:00. So thank you so much to everybody who has joined, and may need to kind of get back to work right now. I will stay online, and answer any more questions that might come up. I think what we may have to have, Beryl, is perhaps even a separate session on recruitment and things like interviewing and so on, because I know there's quite a few questions around that which I may not have time to answer today.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Sehar. I don't know if you have maybe 5 minutes. We can just cover some of the very specific interview questions.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to take a little bit of extra time, and have these discussions and answer any questions. But of course, for anyone who needs to leave, thank you so much for tuning in, and feel free to get in touch with me if you have any more questions or want to chat about anything.
All right. Okay, so the first one I have is, am I at a disadvantage if I have no work experience abroad? And I guess maybe you could also speak to people who have, maybe they don't have multinational, job experience.
Mm-hmm. So I'm so sorry, Beryl. Would you mind repeating that? I just lost you there.
Am I at a disadvantage if I have no work experience abroad? And I was also thinking in that line, maybe for people who may not have any experience working in a multinational.
Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily think that you're at any disadvantage not having that international experience. I mean, I do think it's something that that at least we see clients definitely value, but also more than anything, I think what people value is performance, and just the I think as long as you're showing that within each of the roles that you've had, you've been able to contribute real value, you've been able to perform at a high level. I think having strong references, having strong achievements listed in your CV, I think you can still definitely be a thought leader. I know you've had a lot of sessions this week, Beryl, on creating a brand for yourself. So I think that you can certainly position yourself as a thought leader, as a highly effective industry leader without having any international experience, because there are some key differences where what works in this market doesn't always, or rather what works abroad doesn't always work in this market. And I think that's certainly something that you're able to offer. So yeah, I don't think it positions you at any disadvantage. I think it's just about how are you presenting yourself to recruiters or to companies. And I think on the multinational, the question you had around if you don't have any multinational experience, it's I suppose it just depends on maybe at what level you're trying to enter that space. Because very honestly, I think sometimes it can be a bit challenging to enter at a senior leadership level within a multinational if your prior experience doesn't reflect the same sort of in terms of size of organization you've worked in, or in terms of the roles you've held. I think it is a little bit more challenging. I think it's easier transitioning there earlier in your career or midway through your career. And again, it's just about then positioning yourselves in terms of what are you able to manage, and what is the scale of the role that you've been handling. So I think really what it comes down to is does your experience would it translate well into a multinational setting? And if so, then I don't see what the barrier would be. I'm just going to go back to, I see a few more questions. In Kenya, the challenge has been that there has been no registered accreditation for agricultural professional. What do you advise? I mean, yeah, I don't probably know enough about maybe the agricultural space to really talk in depth around the accreditations, I think I would say. I think, and I think that's a little bit difficult in terms of, what I would advise. I think really just it's about, I think the accreditations in different sectors have been there as a way to sort of regulate the environment, to regulate the professionals, where in industries where I see, there isn't necessarily any registration required. I think then what it comes down to is the companies you've worked for in terms of their reputation. I think that's something employers certainly look at. If you've worked with a good brand, if you've had a significant role there, I think that certainly provides quite a lot of or it provides you with a bit of credit there. I think other qualifications from an educational perspective, also certainly helps. So, look at online trainings, look at international trainings. There's there are also many ways to just increase your knowledge and your expertise through online, courses that can provide you with that international accreditation that may not be available locally. So I think it's just really about positioning yourself, in the correct manner, in that sort of context. Wilkister, is it okay to start with just a salary, however little, expecting to get salary upgrades with time? Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly when it comes to salary, what I always recommend to clients or candidates is, do your calculations, right? Like think about in terms of your costs, in terms of what you're looking at, what is it that you need in order to be comfortable? And I think as long as you have that figure in mind, you can then start thinking about, okay, if this is the figure that I am aiming for, of course I'm aiming for more, but would I accept a role if it provided challenge, if it provided growth, if it provided impact and ticked a lot of the other boxes that I'm looking for? Would I then be able to manage with this basic salary, and would I be able to cover my costs and have some savings? So I think that's how I would say think about it. Have a figure in mind. And then, yes, I think it's okay, because I think once you sort of start your career, once you, show value to a company, once you, actually contribute, I think those salary increases do come over time. But I think it's just important to then also not undersell yourself, which is why I say, know what you're worth, and think about, what is that figure that, you would be comfortable with. And then you can always make decisions around that. Consolata, in this period of COVID, do you think companies can risk hiring a candidate who is earning more than their offer? I have seen this before, even sort of not during COVID, where, for various reasons, candidates have unfortunately been affected by a redundancy, process or restructuring in a company, and so on. And having gone back into the market, have had to take a salary cut. I have seen, businesses take that chance, and many of the candidates have progressed. I think, where they're able to sort of maybe mitigate their risk a little bit is by, maybe tying in the candidate by saying, look, this is what we can offer you, but we can have a very lucrative bonus structure that would help you get back to what you were earning before, if, of course, you perform. So that it, tied to performance, but, they're also still offering the candidate the ability to get back to where they were. So yeah, I think that companies, will be willing to take the risk, because also in this period, if they're able to get, very qualified individuals who they may not have been able to afford or get in any other period, I think that they would take that risk, and they would actually be quite excited to be able to, have a chance to hire those candidates, and have them, provide value in their businesses, whereas, they may not have been able to afford them otherwise. Any other questions? Otherwise, I know I'll go back to, there were two questions, one around kind of the job interview, and then, well, two around the job interview. One was, the question of, why should I hire you, credentials aside. And then the other one is, getting all the way to the job interview and then failing.
Mm-hmm. So I have one question here.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I have one question here, and this came before the session. They're asking, are there companies in Kenya that are sympathetic to women re-entering the workforce?
So that's a good question. And actually, our founder of Kenyans Come Home, Farah Samanani, she's actually a qualified Design Your Life course. A coach, Design Your Life coach. It's a really fantastic training based on design thinking principles pioneered at Stanford, but it's using those principles to actually think about designing your life, and what is it that you want to do, and through that. She's actually, she's now trained over 100 executives, but one of the key professionals that she tends to interact with through that is actually mothers who have left the workforce to have children and are now trying to transition back in. So I don't know if there are specific companies that are more sympathetic or that have any programs in place. I think I remember at some point, I know Safaricom through Vodafone were definitely looking at sort of implementing something like that. So I think that it may be coming in, and particularly we'll see international companies pioneering that. But otherwise, to be honest, I've not seen any specific, programs built around that within many corporates. Again, my advice though has just been to make sure that you put in the work in terms of getting your CV put together, knowing exactly what you're looking for, and being okay to say, look, I took I took some time out, to have some children, because I think that's a very important, obviously, role, and actually in a way it positions you to now be sort of ready and prepped to get back into the workforce, because I think it's really difficult juggling young children and work. But if you've already taken that time out and you're now in a position where you're able to kind of dedicate more time and focus in the workspace, that's actually sort of a great, I think for many companies, they would want to take advantage of that. So I guess that's sort of been our experience with that. Consolata, in this period of COVID, do you think companies can risk hiring? I read that one. Rahab, what is your advice on transitioning from remote work to 9 to 5 and vice versa in terms of CV and interview prep? Sorry, do you think that you could just clarify that a little bit further? Hello? Sorry, I hope everyone can still hear me. Rahab, would you mind just clarifying your question a little bit further? In the meantime, I think I might try and tackle, the two questions around the job interview stage. I know one question was, getting sort of going all the way through the process, up until the interview stage, and then not moving past that. So I think it was Consolata who said, what makes a good candidate fail the job interview? And then I think the second question around that was, when you're in the interview and the client says, okay, putting aside everything, your credentials, convince me why I should hire you. So in terms of, why good candidates maybe fail the job interviews, I think some of this just needs to be, prep work. In my experience, I've interviewed some excellent, talented and professionals who have careers where they have really sort of been very successful in their roles, but when I interview them, they just are not able to articulate those achievements very clearly. I think one big thing that I would probably say that I find as a very common challenge, I would say, in the interview process is that a lot of candidates are not able to concisely provide a response. And I think that also from a cultural perspective, that tends to be a very key thing. We recruit for a lot of companies with international investors or board members or, leadership. And their way of communicating is a lot more direct and succinct. And so that, tends to be a big no. And, sometimes they'll come and say, oh, I interviewed this candidate, but their answers were just so long and they rambled so much, and they didn't answer the question in specifics. It was very vague. And to be honest, I have the same experience. So I think the one, key tip, if I could give anybody, is practice being very succinct, very concise, in your responses within an interview. Focus on your achievements. Be able to, draw on any statistics that you have, any key results you have. Be specific in your responses. Recruiters and hiring managers are not looking for vague answers. If we ask you, so what was your biggest sort of contribution or learning in this particular role, if you give us a 10-minute answer on how leading a team and providing mentorship was the biggest thing, yes, that's fine, but I think what people are really looking for are kind of very concise, specific and maybe more quantitative responses as to what is it that you actually achieved. So don't be vague. Don't give a generic response that anybody could give. Give a response that is specific to you. If someone asks you about your thoughts on leading a team or your approach to managing a team, make it authentic. Make it what you really believe. Give examples of what you've experienced. Don't just quote what you think what you think the job interviewer wants to hear. So I think what I would say is just focus on authenticity. Be very concise and specific in your responses. And then the last thing I would say is prep. Please prepare for your interviews. A lot of people don't prepare for it. They think they can just walk in and say, I can answer the questions and there's no need to prep. Learn about the company, ask them good questions about the job, show that you've actually taken the time and the interest to really learn about the company in that specific role, and also just take the time to review your own responses, your own experience, so that you have those statistics at the tips of your fingers, the dates at the tips of your fingers. So practice with a friend, practice with a colleague, ask them to ask you questions that you might expect in the interview. By preparing, you'll also be a little bit more confident and a little bit more comfortable in the interview. And I think we'll be able to really then show your authentic side better. All right, great. Well, thanks so much, Beryl. I think, that's it for our time. I guess there was a lot to cover, but please get in touch. My contacts are there, and Beryl will also share with them if you want to chat further or have any more questions. Thank you so much for your participation. It's been so great interacting with all of you, please be in touch. Thanks, Beryl. Over to you.
All right, Sehar, thank you so much for your time and for the wealth of information you've shared. I think it applies to anyone, and not just those who are seeking to make the transition back home. Yeah, so first of all, I think in regards to the questions that have been asked specifically in regards to interviewing, interview prep, CV preparation, we did cover this somewhat yesterday, but we are going to be launching something next week, and that's going to be specifically covering a lot of these questions, because I can imagine how many variations of those questions we can get for this session. So please look out for that. That will come out together with the recordings for the session. So if you didn't catch yesterday's recordings, you will need to look at the schedule and just review what it is that we discussed during that session. Yeah, and we are now going to be set. Yeah. So, Sehar, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated it. I'm sure everyone has also appreciated it. Yeah. And if you need to get in touch with, I would advise, in case you're thinking of making that move back to Kenya, please get in touch with Sehar. I highly recommend them. I've personally experienced their services and my clients as well, and they're very good. And they can really assist you in that level. Yeah. So everyone, thank you so much once again, and I hope to see you at 3 p.m. Goodbye.